All right, now we're going to look at questions 11 and 12 from page 598. Okay, so on these, we're supposed to, let me see if I can get this to page down. There we go. All right, so 11 and 12, the directions say find the exact value of the remaining trig functions. Find the exact values of remaining trig functions. Of theta, okay? So it's kind of interesting. So it gives you tangent of theta on number 11 is -3/4, and then it tells you that the cosine of theta is less than 0. Okay, that information is primarily, to start with, trying to tell you what quadrant you should be in. So we need a quadrant where tangent is negative, cosine is also negative. So for cosine to be negative, we need to be to the left. That's quadrants 2 and 3. For tangent to be negative, we need the x and the y coordinates to be different. So basically what I think of is just this. Okay, so I need to be, for this one, I need to be in quadrants 2 or 4. Okay, so since both has to be true, I'd have to be in quadrant 2. Okay, so now you draw your triangle in quadrant 2. Draw your terminal side, put a point on there somewhere, drop the perpendicular always to the x-axis. Remember, tangent is opposite over adjacent. This is where you should look when you're thinking about theta. Here's theta really, but you can look here when you're trying to decide the opposite adjacent. So this should be 3, this should be 4. And since tangent was negative, one of those is negative, it has to be this guy. So get your numbers onto your little triangle. Okay. You need the hypotenuse. So you do 3 squared plus -4 squared. That's 25, and you need the square root of that. So that's going to be 5. So you know your tangent, they want all the rest. So you're going to do sine and cosine. They gave you this one. And then you're going to come back and do cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay? So now I know sine be +3/5. Cosine is -4/5. And if you didn't put the negative on the 4 right there, you should think about how cosine is negative in the second quadrant and be sure to have a negative on that. Cosecant goes with sine, so you're going to flip over your sine. Secant and cosine are reciprocals, so that would be -5/4. And then tangent and cotangent are reciprocals, so that would be -4/3. And there you have it. All right, now 12 has the same directions. All right, but this time you're given cosine of theta is 3/7, and the sine of theta is less than 0. Okay, so think about your coordinates in these quadrants. It's the best way to think about it. Okay, and then cosine is positive, so that means I have to be in quadrant 1 or 4, I mean. And then sine is negative. Sine being negative means you have to be below the x-axis in either 3 or 4. So you must be in quadrant 4. So draw your triangle in quadrant 4. Okay, and it's adjacent over hypotenuse. Should be, even though this is your angle, you can focus there inside the triangle when you're trying to label the pieces. So 3 would have to be the adjacent side, 7 would have to be the hypotenuse. So now you're going to take your 3 squared plus your x, meant to say x here, your x squared would have to equal 7 squared. So that's 9 plus x squared equals 49. So x squared would be 40. So x would be square root of 40. Okay, the hypotenuse is always a positive because it's the radius of the circle. And then if we rationalize that, it would be 2 square root of 10. All right, so let me get all these written so I'm ready to deal with these. Okay. All right, and we were given the cosine was 3/7. Okay, so now we found that missing piece, and that was 2 square root of 10. So now we can wind up doing the rest of these. So sine should be 2 square root of 10 over the 7. Tangent should be the opposite over the adjacent. Cosecant should be the reciprocal of sine. This gets a little messy because we haven't dealt with rationalizing when you have a number part out in front. Basically, I can just multiply by square root of 10 over 10. Square root of 10 over the square root of 10. And that'll give me 7 square root of 10. These will be 10. And so I have 2 times 10, which is 20. So that might be tough if that's the first time you've seen that. Okay, secant is the reciprocal of cosine. And then I need the reciprocal of tangent. So I'm going to have a similar issue there. It'll be 3 over 2 square root of 10. And I wind up getting square root of 10 here and here. And then I'm going to have 3 square root of 10 over 20. All right, now, I wasn't careful on this one. I always go back and look. I wasn't careful on this one. After I found that when I did that plus or minus, I actually kind of reported that incorrectly. So this will be a good teaching lesson. I wasn't finding the radius, right? The 7 was already given to me. So what I found was actually the y. And so that actually could be positive or negative. So let me fix that. Okay. I would have caught that mistake. I wish I hadn't made it, but I would have caught that mistake because at the end, I always think about the quadrant I'm in and what the various values should be. So anyway, when I got to here, this was not the radius of the circle. This was that y. And, you know, when you look at what quadrant you're in, you can see actually that it needs to be negative. So I'm kind of glad that happened to show you it happens to the best of, even experts. Okay. So you have to be careful about it and make sure things make sense when you're finished. So let me go back in here. Let me do it in red. So sine, this is actually negative here. That really, and that's what kind of made me catch it, is the sine should have been negative. Cosine was positive. Tangent should be negative because tangent is sine over cosine. So it should be negative. Cosecant and sine should both have the same final sine value, so it should be negative. Secant and cosine are both positive. Cotangent should be negative. Okay? All right, so there you have it. Okay, so you draw your triangle, you find the missing side. Since that wasn't the radius of the circle, it actually could be negative and would need to be negative for the angle to be in quadrant 4. And then if you'll put that on the value you get, that'll help you get the correct SIGN of your trig function values. Okay, and then do like I did, look at the end and make sure that they make sense. And if not, see what's wrong. Did you forget to have the sign? Did you forget to put a negative on something like I did? Okay. All right, so that's questions 11 and 12. I'm going to go ahead and stop those.